Hey, it's me. Get your tickets for Kinda Funny Live 3 at kindafunny.com/KFL3. It's June 3rd. You're going to love it. I'm going to be there. Everyone's going to be there. You should be there too.
This episode of the Kinda Funny Games Cast is brought to you by Sherry's Berries. Mother's Day is coming up, and Sherry's Berries is offering huge, freshly dipped strawberries starting at $19.99 plus shipping. And right now, you can double the berries for just $10 more. Pick your delivery date, and those berries are guaranteed to arrive fresh and delicious, or your money back. I got these berries for Gia once, and if I'm lying, I'm dying. I ate all of them, and I don't even regret it. They were good. They were damn good. She was pretty bummed, but she was happy I was happy, and that's really all that matters at the end of the day. Anyways, the only way to get this amazing berries deal starting at just $19.99 is to visit berries.com. You click on the microphone in the top right corner and use the code KFGAMES. That's BERRIES.com and the code KFGAMES. You click on the mic. This amazing deal won't last long, and Mother's Day is right around the corner, so make your mama proud. Order now. Wow. This is a great segue into topic number 2. This topic's brought to you by Patreon producer Tom Bach. Shout out to Tom Bach, the homie, as they say.
I know him.
You do.
He's come by here. He sat here. He ate barbecue with us.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was an article.
It is cool.
It's cool. What about?
An article by Ian Bogost, posted over at The Atlantic. Headline was, "Video games are better without stories." Now this thing went viral for all
People are
intents
mad
of
about
the
it.
word, and yeah, people are upset about it. We've all read the article. I want to kind of have a discussion about the article and also about video game stories and is he right, is he wrong, whatever. My thing is, seeing this headline upset me.
Yes.
There's like a guttural reaction that's just like, fuck you, leave my shit alone.
Yeah.
Video games, I will fight for them.
I love
you know?
games.
Yeah, it's like, don't insult my shit. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But then reading the article, as I was going through, I'm like, all right, you're making points. I don't agree with all the points, but I'm like, I'm going to think about this more instead of just standing up to fight because you're insulting something that I love.
Yeah.
What were your guys' thoughts?
Well, I mean, he brought up What Remains of Edith Finch, and the way. Thank you.
Kevin hasn't made a face yet, but your turn, and so I was making sure.
Uh,
Great, just making sure, bud. I
The
didn't know
way-
that. I didn't know Tim was breathing last week. You know, so I didn't. Sometimes I can't trust your ears anymore. It turns out.
Anyway, the way that he brought it up was like, this is obviously a story, but it's called an interactive story. But how interactive is it when there's really only one thing that you can do in every environment? And I understand that criticism. There's like games that have stories that I kind of like the idea that a player gets to control the pace of something like that. And with like it's environmental storytelling. And I think that that is a powerful thing that doesn't really exist thoroughly in any other medium, where I can look at something and spend as much or as little time as I want to exploring what that thing is. And I think that's where video games have kind of an upper hand on other forms of storytelling. And I think that like there are plenty of games that have trash dialogue. We have a lot of writers in video games who aren't experienced in writing narrative at all. So it's like, it's a mixed barrel, but if something like The Last of Us didn't exist, I think the world would be a worse place. That's like my thesis here.
Yeah.
My jumping off point with the article was I think it's got a bad headline because
I agree.
it is a broad stroke, a shot across the bow of video games. And
Yeah.
then when he gets into it, he's not talking about every game. On this measure, alas, the best interactive stories are still worse than even middling books and films. And he brings up Gone Home and Edith Finch and all. He's talking
big
about
ones. BioShock,
He's talking
Last
about
of Us.
walking simulators though. When Last of Us gets like a tertiary mention, I didn't feel like he was really going at Last of Us.
No.
Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I agree.
But I felt like he was much more the walking simulator, this kind of thing. Because that, I don't know if he's not necessarily wrong. I love video games, but it is that argument of like, think of the amount of video games we've all played and the amount of times you walked away and been like, what a story. You know what I mean? Usually for me, it's what an experience.
Yes.
I was wrapped up in this. And Gone Home is one that I always talk about, right? Of like, I finished that and like, when, you know, the credits rolled and I was like, holy shit, that was awesome. But it was like, yeah, they're just telling me their story. And this is when I used to go to bat for, and still do, for the Telltale's game design choices, where people were like, oh, Walking Dead Season 1 didn't even matter. None of my choices mattered. It all got to the same point. And I was like, well, no,
not the
like,
point.
my whole argument was that the game starts in one point, deviates out, but then inevitably has to come back. And it's all the little choices we made here. I always said it was like a coloring book page. We all have the same coloring book page, but when we sit down and show them to each other, they all are shaded differently. Because we all came away from the same story, but we all had different moments and things you didn't know somebody else did or this. You had to get to the point that what are you going to do about Lee Everett? Like, Clem's got to go off on her own. Like, that's the story they wanted to tell you, but the journey there for you is what it was about.
What I thought was interesting that he brought up with Gone Home is comparing it to like young adult novels, where I was just like, again, you're not necessarily wrong. You know, like you're putting it in a category where it's like young adult sounds like an insult, but it's like, no, the young adult novels obviously
It's a genre.
It's a genre, and a lot of people are really into it, and they take something away from it. And it's like, if you were to take that same story and adapt it in a way that made sense in a young adult novel, people would be moved similarly, right, from that experience. And it's just the headline to me, the thesis of what he was saying is more like video games shouldn't focus on having stories.
Yeah.
Whereas the headline is video games are better without stories. And it's like, that just goes back to the gameplay is king argument, where it's
Yeah.
like, I just think that there's so many different types of games that it doesn't need to be a this or that, right? Like, there are so many games that don't need stories. Mario, like platformers, and that's not a rule, but like overall, platformers are about
Save the
game.
princess. There's no choice here. This
Yeah.
is what's going on.
Yeah.
Bowser's got her.
Like that, all the story is just to kind of like just get it going, right? And just
frame
more
why you're
more
doing
for
this.
fun,
Yeah.
right? Like to give a light reason for why locations look the way they do, or whatever, right? But like it's more set dressing. But then there's games that are just purely like the story is the point, and the rest the mechanics are all built around getting you through that. And it's interesting to think about like books, for example, because it's like, oh, well, the difference between a game and a book is it's the interactivity and you're in it. And it's like the plot doesn't progress unless you play. It's like, well, the plot of a book doesn't progress unless you read.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that said, like, what does Gone Home, the book, look like? Like, I really think that the way that story is told in that game is probably the most effective way to tell that story, because it's pieced to you slowly. Like, how do you write a book like that?
Yeah.
Like, how does that work?
I mean, the other thing about Gone Home too is the fact that I think we're in this example so far removed from the release of Gone Home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we all beat the dead horse.
I actually only played it this year.
Did you know the twist? Did you know what you were getting into?
Yeah.
Because that was the thing. Like, and I was talking to Jen about this too, where she's like, I haven't played it, because I was asking about the wall art when we move. Like, where should we put this stuff? She's like, well, no, I haven't played it. I'm like, do you know what happens? Because if not, we're stuck. She's like, no, I totally know. I'm like, fuck.
Yeah.
Because like for me, it was that day the reviews popped, and it was Marty tweeting, it was McElroy tweeting and being like, hey, if you don't go play this game, don't read anything, don't do anything, go play. And I sat down, and playing that game, you're like, oh, it's a fucking horror game. I'm in a horror game, and playing through and like being like, where's the ghost? And like you're picking up paranormal activity books, and you're like, oh fuck, it's gonna start any second.
It was like one of the coolest things about Firewatch as well. It's
Yeah.
like, is this a horror game?
You don't know where
When's
it's
it gonna be a
going
horror
and
game?
what's
Yeah.
gonna happen. And like that was part of it for me that makes Gone Home so amazing, was the fact of playing it and being like, all right, what's going on? All right, cool, this girl's missing. Oh, okay, well, I'm getting it through her. Okay, cool. She's going through. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I gotta look out for the ghost. And then finally it was like, there was like a moment like, wait, is this the game? Is the
Yeah.
game? And then there was that moment of like, all right, cool. And you're going, I'm in that. And then there, like the bulb explodes. You're like, oh no, is it a horror game? I don't know. What's in the attic?
So
You
that's
know?
like part of it, right? Like, how the hell do you do that in a book? Like,
Yeah.
I think that's a really successful way of telling a story. And I was super immersed in that game for the amount of time that I played it. What, 3-4 hours maybe?
Oh,
I don't
not
know.
even,
It's
probably
super
hour and a
short.
half. Yeah.
Yeah. There's an achievement for fucking finishing that game in 10 minutes.
Greg
No,
knows
there's
it
an
well.
achievement for
Was
I
it
think
1
under
minute?
a minute.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And it took me a really long time.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, it's gonna be easy. It's gonna
you-
take 3 minutes.
What's that thing? You walk over, you hit the door, you double click the door doesn't, you're like, fuck, restart.
Or if you like slightly bump the
Yep.
staircase, you're like,
Yeah.
well, I gotta
that was
restart.
it. Waste of my time.
You don't fucking drop the duck fast enough.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
insane.
Stupid-ass duck.
Took me a really long time.
Don't talk shit on Christmas Duck.
Fuck the duck.
Right
Fuck
there.
the
What up?
Is that actually the duck?
Yeah, it's one of the prototypes they made when they were getting ready.
way.
to- Don't. Oh no.
He
Steve
killed that
Gaynor
duck.
gave us that.
No.
That is a
The duck
prototype.
he'll be back. He'll be back. He'll flock.
Yeah, but now Kevin's.
flock.
It's a good
No,
boy.
no.
Steve Gaynor will come back too. Yes.
Oh,
Well,
you're
yeah.
really fucked
Well,
up.
now he's watching. Now he's just watching
He's
us.
just chilling. He's just chilling. I like that. Yeah, it's interesting that like the same games always get brought up when you
Sure.
start talking about game stories, like games with good stories, because
Yeah.
most of the games do just have generic stories just to get through whatever it is. And I don't necessarily think that that's bad. And I think that it's important to kind of give credit where credit's due to the games that do push that narrative and do give an experience that is
you guys
unique
play
to the
Virginia?
franchise.
Oh yeah.
That's a really unique way to tell a story. I actually didn't like that game very
Oh,
much.
really?
Yeah, I was just by the end, like I loved it until I got to a point where I was like, okay, this doesn't make any sense to me now, and I'm annoyed.
Virginia grew on me the more I thought about it. When I finished,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, that was fun, whatever. And then I kept finding myself thinking about it like before bed or whatever. And then I went back and platinumed it. And I was
in the
like,
box?
What the hell's going on in the box? That was one of those games that I came around on. And like,
Yeah.
what's interesting about bringing Last of Us into this equation is that I don't again, think he's talking about the narrative of Last of Us or bringing that up. But I always think about how Last of Us was so great at interactive environmental storytelling, of walking into a house and being like, somebody lived here, and finding notes and like references to them. And of course, the whole Ishmael storyline, like that you could totally blow by and never know anything about it. But if you were picking up all these different things and tracing them from the water till their ultimate end, you're like, holy shit, this was fucking awesome.
The thing with The Last of Us, though, is that it would also make a really good TV show.
Yeah.
Like, it could do both, and it would be perfectly
Sure.
fine. And
That's
I
a
had
great
problems
point.
playing that game because anything that's like too tense, you know that boss fight in Resident Evil 7? That when you're in close quarters with the two chainsaws?
Yeah, I fucking hate that one.
Me too, but because it stressed me out so much. And I had that with The Last of Us, where anything that's too tense, I have to put down for a bit. So it's like, it took me a while to get through that game because I had to keep taking breaks because I was like, I'm going to die. I'm going to get shipped. Like, this is terrifying. And I just had to keep stopping. And I like wonder if consuming that as a movie would have made this story. Nah, I don't know. It still had a huge impact on me.
Yeah.
But like, there's something to be said for like things like that should cross over. Like, I'm glad if they make a movie out of that. I don't really care about Call of Duty, but there are like plenty of like Assassin's Creed could have been good. Like that's the thing that like playing through the first two games, like I was like, this could have made a great movie. They just kind of screwed it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, Prince of Persia.
Yeah, we'll see if there's ever a good video game movie.
I mean,
One
that's
day.
the thing that's interesting though, is you take all the games that have turned into movies, and it's like all they're doing is taking the story elements and just adapting it to film. And a lot of games are just trying to mimic movies,
Yeah.
right? And it's
I
like-
feel like that's what's happening now, though, and like we brought up the young adult fiction isn't a knock against it. It's just that there's not a lot of games exploring that space, and we're back to what I always talk about, right, with the silly putty. Video games are growing and going in every direction, and that's awesome because there's a game now for every mood you're in. But the library still isn't that huge for when we're talking about like, well, I want to do the young adult stuff. Well, not that many. Nor is it the fact that we've learned all the lessons, right, in terms of how old the industry is. So it is this generation that grew up on Mario being like, I'm making games now, and I want them to be more like movies, but for the people who are growing up playing Last of Us right now, what happens when they jump out and they're ready to start making stuff and they've consumed and know it in a different way? So again, I think the headline's bullshit, and that's what started the anger. Because I'm sure most people didn't even read the entire article, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure that's like where it starts and stops for a lot of people, and they do want to get defensive and yell about it. But I do think there's a point of like, yeah, a lot of video game stories do suck, and they don't.
They don't need them.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's getting you from point A to point B, and like we can do better, and we're going to do better, and we are doing better. And I think there are standout examples. I think Gone Home is a great example of what you're saying of like. That doesn't work as a movie. That doesn't work as a TV show. Like, what is that? You just come home and you're finding notes and walking around and reliving memories. And it's
Sounds
like, well,
great.
no, there's a million other ways to do that. But in the same way of like, when I'll watch a movie and it is like a high school drama or whatever, and it's just like, high school doesn't even matter. You don't even know. You know what I mean? But that's because that is a young adult movie that I'm watching and enjoying for what it is and not worrying about it.
Yeah. It's kind of, I think that is a genre of storytelling in itself that exists exclusively in video games. Like something like Firewatch, something like Gone Home. Like I like that video games have like even sort of recently figured out what stories they tell and how they tell them. And it is mostly like us being pieced dialogue slowly and mostly exploring things. And I like that too. Like that video games have figured out this is like a short form book that we have made, but it only can exist in this format. Like what is Firewatch the book? I don't know.
Yeah.
But like there's totally games that I think I would have preferred if they didn't have a story at the same time, which is like kind of the thesis of the article that the headline involves.
I mean, that's the thing. Go back to it. The video games are better without stories. It comes down to the gameplay versus story, but then there's the games that mesh both of those perfectly.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we've gotten too many great examples of that, because most of the things that we're naming, it's like we talk about the experience more than anything. Like we don't really talk about the gameplay of Last of Us.
Yeah.
We talk about the story of Last of Us.
Well,
and we
the
don't
gameplay
really
of
talk
Last of Us is pretty good though.
it's pretty good, but it's still like the shooting and everything in it it's
Yeah.
not the same as the way you would talk about a quality shooter.
Yeah.
Like it's a 10 out of 10
Yeah, you're right.
top of the line shooter, right?
It's
And
also like Gone Home. What is that gameplay?
yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
And because it's about the plot, it's about progressing
Yeah.
the plot. And then I think the Metal Gear Solid series is an interesting example of both sides of this, where there's thought put into the story, whether or not you think it's a good story, and depending on the game, I would argue it is or isn't.
Yeah.
There's still obvious points of the plot is important, and the characters are important, and they're thinking about how it's all going to fit in for that game and for the sequels and for all that. But then you look, yeah. But like Metal Gear Solid 5 is an example of the gameplay is perfect, the story's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you look at like other Metal Gear Solid games, and it's like the gameplay it's fine, but the story's really great. And then it's like there's not really the perfect middle ground,
Yeah.
because then it turns into like a Metal Gear Solid 4 where the gameplay is really fun, but the story turns into more movie than video game story.
I just think I'm fine with that. Like, I think I'm okay with picking one or the other and having the option of being like, today I want a story-focused game and today I want a gameplay-focused game. Like, I kind of like that. Like, it would be great to have one that would have both, but like, I'm fine with having to make a choice.
I think the reason you
having
talk
both.
about experience so much is because it's unique to the medium. That there isn't an experience to watching a movie necessarily. And I mean, there's obviously different examples, but the fact of the matter is someone's talking at you. This is you participating, right? And that's what I always talk about where, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to come home and I'm going to want to play something. I'm going to want to interact. But there's those rare nights where I'm tired or whatever, and I just want somebody to talk to me, talk at me, not even talk to me, talk at me, tell me your story and be done with it. And so, like, I think in between the bouts of combat in BioShock, for instance, the recordings players discover have no influence on the action of the game except to color the interpretation of the action. The payoff, if that's the right word for it, is a tepid reprimand against blind compliance, the very conceit the BioShock player would have to embrace to play the game in the first place. And it's like, no, like BioShock is this awesome experience. And again, we're taking for granted how fucking cool that reveal, the would you kindly reveal was. Like when you didn't know that was coming and you got there and you were like, holy shit, that's awesome. Not to mention, like, in terms of environmental storytelling, I think BioShock does it so well with picking up audio diaries and continuing to explore and scavenge for things and feel like, this is an old argument, but like, is BioShock a first-person shooter? Because you get 3 bullets and you're really not supposed to fight anything until you have to fight something, and then it's going to be by the skin of your teeth, you're usually going to get through it. Like, that game is an experience. It pulls together all these awesome bits that I think you lose the seam of, like, well, maybe the story wasn't that great. It was just telling whatever. Blah, blah, blah. Like, no, like, the way it all comes together as a package is what we're talking about when we talk about video games in the medium.
Well, there's a bunch of problems I have with BioShock Infinite story. Like,
BioShock Infinite, yeah, I know.
So, like, I played that game, and then I played it again. So, clearly I enjoyed the gameplay, but weirdly I don't remember enjoying the gameplay. And it's, like, just the fact that what you are doing in that game versus what you are told the story is about are two completely different things. It's like, you're told that it's a story about a girl, but what you actually do is just fucking kill people the whole time. And it's like, that is a limit of the medium. Like, maybe BioShock Infinite would be an example of something that maybe would be better as a book, but the gameplay is great, so it kind of doesn't matter. Like, we just kind of, like, passively take it, and it's fine.
And that's the thing, and I think that's one of the, comparing BioShock, or the original comes out in BioShock 2, different development team, but not even in the remotely same league. BioShock Infinite, you hope is going to be the return to BioShock 1 because we have expectations of what BioShock 1 was. And this BioShock Infinite is a first-person shooter. You kill more people on the first level than you did in all of BioShock because there's just so much going on. And it is like, wow, Americana, and this is going to be awesome. And it's like, nope, just eating hot dogs out of toilets and fucking blowing everybody to bits. And it's like, okay, I agree with you. Like, I played through that, on like 2 days off or whatever from IGN, and it was like, cool, that was fun, but like, I'm not ever going to think about it again. Like, that's something I ran through and did, like most Call of Duties I play, not Call of Duties or Battlefields, where it's like, oh, that was cool, peace out, whatever. Like, that's fine. I don't need to think about this.
And like with the violence thing, they try to tie it into the story by saying Booker is a violent man. But that's the thing that I look at as like, they figured that out afterwards, not beforehand. It wasn't like Booker's a violent man. That's a part of who he is. And then they were like, oh, we kill a lot of people. Let's make that a part of the story. And I feel like it's like this dumb thing that was fed to people. It's just like, it's exposition and it's shitty. It's like such a disconnect for that game specifically that like, I don't think BioShock 1 had. I think BioShock 1 was incredibly strong in terms of storytelling. It just like was probably weighed down, if anything, by the fetch questy shit.
Sure,
There's a lot of that
cross rapture, of course. And that's the thing.
That's
is
video
like,
games. So
video games are a balance, right? Where BioShock Infinite gameplay's fun, sure, but it fucks up what the story you think was going to be or should have been, kind of thing, right? The games that find it somewhere in the middle are like, it's a good story and it's good gameplay. Those are the ones that stand out and you talk about.
Do you guys play Enslaved?
No. Oh,
a bit,
Odyssey to the West?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I really liked that game.
Yeah.
And, like, the gameplay was good for when it came out, and the story is really interesting. It kind of, like, gets messy, but I feel like that's an example of a really good balance of those two things, even though it's, like, it's still parts there that it's just, like, defend the girl, and it's, like, you just throw her up on a ledge, whatever, but it's still super fun.
I mean, I think more recently, in similar vein, too, is Horizon, where Horizon's gameplay was awesome, and I was blown away by how much I enjoyed that story. How I was like, fuck, I want to go do the next main quest because I want to know what's happening to people.
So Uncharted's another series that gets thrown around a lot when people are talking about story, and a lot of that isn't necessarily even just the plot, but it's also the characters involved. thinking about it for me, it's like the gameplay is great, and I think that what's special about Uncharted is that you get to be part of the chase scenes. You're part of the gunfights. And
The whole of Madagascar in 4 was just fucking amazing.
so good. So I mean, the whole franchise is so great. I mean, the 2 is better than 3, but it's so
I
great. But
Funny, IGN.com says it's a 10.
yeah, oh yeah. When you take
I'm gonna go edit that.
when you take Uncharted and you're like, okay, what if it was just a movie? Like you take all the main beats of Uncharted, because
Yeah.
like honestly, besides the main beats, like the collecting the random treasures and stuff, that's not the point of the game. That's just extra stuff to do, right?
Sure.
Like that would be cut from a movie for a reason, right? Would the Uncharted movie be good? I don't necessarily think so.
It would be very different. It would be a popcorn blockbuster movie, because the problem is like what you're talking about, right? Like usually, honestly, Uncharted's story gets made fun of, right? Lazarevich is just drinking blue sap. Okay, whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? How did Talbot disappear in that dark alley? Whatever.
Well, there's that story, but then there's the story of the relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What Uncharted succeeds at and makes Uncharted stand out and be so beloved is the fact you love Nate and Sully, you love Nate and Elena, you love all these people interacting with each other, and a movie would never get that in 2 hours.
Yeah, and the subtleties, the reason that I like Nathan Drake so much is just like he finds something dumb, you don't care about it, but the stuff that he says when he finds it, it's like, yeah, this dude is a good guy. And it's like, that's weird because I don't give a fuck about what those pirates are doing. I don't care at all. Just like, tell me what's happening with Elena. Like, that's all I wanted in 4 was to see her and know how she felt. And that's interesting in that it's like 3 separate parts of a game. Like the actual treasure hunting story, that's history, the relationships, which is what I actually care about, and then the gameplay, which like I really wanted what Uncharted would be like without as much shooting. Like, would we enjoy it as much?
I mean,
because that takes out the
it
subtleties.
becomes a movie.
Yeah, kind of.
Right, you know, and like that's the thing is, it's just like is it only a good story? And again, story involving all the things we were talking about. Is it only a good story because it's a video game? Like, or is it only a good story for a video game?
I don't think so. But the thing is, if you take out all the gameplay, then you lose all the banter, and you lose just those subtle conversations that really build those characters.
The one-liners that make you laugh and chuckle while you are negotiating this thing. When in doubt, climb, like that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's something that wouldn't play as a one-liner in a movie to make you care more about Marky Mark's version of or Nathan Drake. You know what I mean? Like, that's another game that I think succeeds so well because it's an experience and is so beloved because it is something only our medium can do. National Treasure is Uncharted for the most part, right? If you wanted to. And National Treasures are fun movies, but they're not like, man, can't wait for the next National Treasure. I'm going to go watch National Treasure again. No.
That one guy who said that is now very offended.
Yeah, sorry. Don't get me wrong. I loved it. The sequel, though, come on. Bringing the parents in, it was a weird choice.
Come on.
Like that and stuff.
All right, well, there you go. You guys can go read the article over on The Atlantic.
Like how you're like, all right, well, there you go. We made absolutely no decision on this.
No,
we have drawn no conclusion.
I think there is. I think the conclusion is that it's just like, hey, video games are just as wide and varied as any other form. And it's just like, he's making good points and he's right about certain games, but he's not right about all games. And,
And the headline sucks.
and
Headline would
Headline's
definitely
really
know,
bad
like we
too.
would have.
Pretty
It
quick.
definitely got the press, though. It got the clicks.
Yes, you did well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for watching that. You can click right there to subscribe to youtube.com/kindoffunnygames. You can click right there to subscribe to youtube.com/kindoffunny. You can support us on Patreon, get a lot of things early, and you can click right here for some fucking magic.